The whole damn sky tore open, no warning, no countdown. Just a sudden shriek in the air followed by impact. The first explosion vaporized the northern pipeline junction. The second struck a cluster of fuel tanks so violently flames shot hundreds of feet into the air. Within 30 seconds, 12 more explosions followed, each one more precise than the last. It wasn't chaos, it was a sequence, a choreography, like someone had planned every fireball to the second, and they had. Because this wasn't random. This wasn't a drone strike gone off course. This was Package Delta, a coordinated multi-phase U.S. strike that hit brassy CISA like a hammer, flattening fuel depots, logistics centers, underground tunnels, and a suspected command node buried beneath a storage facility. By the time the last ordnance hit the once bustling terminal, looked like a cratered wasteland, and the Houthis scrambling silent, stunned, because for years Ras Isa had been off-limits, untouched. Even during the heaviest years of Saudi airstrikes, the port had been spared, seen as infrastructure. Not a military target, but not anymore. The U.S. didn't just cross that line, it erased it. And the question isn't why they did it. The real question is, what message were they sending? Because the last time a nation struck an oil terminal this critical, it rewrote the rules of engagement in the entire region. And this wasn't just an airstrike, it was a warning delivered in fire Ras Isa. It wasn't just a port, it was a bank vault, a gas station, and a war fund encased in steel for the Houthi movement. The Ras Isa oil terminal on Yemen's Red Sea coast wasn't just infrastructure, it was survival. Millions of barrels of crude had moved through it. Some refined locally, others trucked inland to power armored convoys, or sold illicitly to fund drones and missile systems. For years, the U.S. and its partners monitored it from orbit. They observed fuel deliveries, unusual vehicle movements, and spikes in nighttime operations. Yet, no steps were taken. Why? Because targeting a fuel facility, especially one close to civilian zones, is a diplomatic tightrope. One miscalculation could trigger global condemnation, disrupt oil markets, and spark allegations of war crimes. That's precisely why the Houthis believed it was untouchable. Until it wasn't. What shifted? One word: escalation. In the lead-up to April 17th, Houthi forces intensified their hostility. Civilian tankers were harassed. U.S. Navy destroyers were targeted by radar. MQ-9 Reaper drones were brought down. A missile came dangerously close to a U.S. F-16. This wasn't just defiance, it was provocation. And when they challenged the U.S. to retaliate, the U.S. did. Behind closed doors, ISR assets, Triton drones, satellites, and SIGINT captures were discreetly constructing the full picture. Ras Isa wasn't merely a refueling hub, it was a critical component of the Houthi military infrastructure. It managed communications, hosted senior field personnel, and housed mobile command centers. It had evolved into a command and control nexus. Once intelligence verified that a weapons cache was being prepped at Ras Isa for regional deployment, the call was made. This wasn't just a legitimate target, it was a high-priority one. At 1:03 local time, the command was issued: Package Delta. Execute. To most, meaningless code. To the sailors aboard the USS Truman and the destroyers stationed off the coast of Yemen, it was a signal. Precise, deliberate, and immediate. Package Delta isn't a show of force. It's a calculated strike plan for when a location stops being strategic and starts becoming dangerous. And threats aren't granted mercy. Within minutes, the operation was in motion. On the deck of the Truman, yellow-clad crew members guided 4 FA-18 Super Hornets into launch readiness. Each jet was armed with GBU-38 JDAMs, precision-guided explosives meant for reinforced targets, and AGM-88 HARMs, anti-radiation missiles built to destroy hostile radar installations. This wasn't a show, it was a calculated extraction. Meanwhile, 2 EA-18G Growlers were already airborne. Their objective, electronic warfare: disrupt radar, scramble defenses, fill the skies with digital interference, deception at supersonic pace. High above, a Navy MQ-4C Triton drone maintained surveillance at 55,000 feet, scanning thermal signatures, electronic emissions, and communications traffic. The fire control crews below had a flawless live battlefield overview. At 1:17, the strike began. The Growlers led the charge, swift and high, jamming wideband frequencies and blinding early detection systems. Moments later, the Hornets arrived, low and fast over the Red Sea at 500 knots. Their targets had been verified long before. Target Alpha, a cluster of fuel storage tanks north of the pipeline zone believed to contain mobile generator fuel, possibly even rocket-grade propellant. The JDAMs hit with deadly accuracy. Flames erupted, tanks exploded, a chain detonation rippled through the northern compound. Triton's thermal optics registered secondary explosions, a sign of stored munitions or worse, but the offensive didn't end there. Offshore, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer activated its VLS, Vertical Launch System, unleashing 2 Tomahawk cruise missiles. Their objectives: a suspected weapons smuggling tunnel entrance and a communications relay antenna transmitting encrypted signals. Both targets were annihilated. From the initial launch to the final explosion, 6 minutes. Not a battle, a perfectly executed dismantling. The outcome was swift and overwhelming. 17 confirmed direct hits. 0 collateral damage outside the designated strike zone. All primary targets neutralized. No civilian casualties reported. Yet the true effect wasn't measured in destruction, it was psychological. Houthi radio transmissions collapsed, signals cut off mid-communication. GPS coverage failed. Radar installations either shut down or fell silent, too afraid to emit and reveal their location. They lost fuel, they lost coordination, they lost command structure, but above all, they lost their image of invulnerability. For years, Ras Issa had stood as a symbol, a safeguarded stronghold. Now it was ruins. And overhead, the MQ-4C Triton still circled, observing. The smoke hadn't even settled before chaos took hold. Within an hour, Houthi channels flared up, then went dark. Encrypted lines surged, then flatlined. Backup systems failed. Thermal scans revealed militants abandoning the port on foot. No vehicles, no supplies, just fleeing. This wasn't a strategic withdrawal. It was a full-blown collapse. And from a faction renowned for endurance, that silence said everything. But publicly, the spin began. Within 3 hours, Houthi Telegram channels uploaded a blurry clip of what they alleged was a downed American drone. No coordinates, no timestamp, just flames and wreckage, likely old footage recycled for propaganda. It was a diversion, a way to reassure their audience. They wanted to project resilience. But satellite photos told another tale. Entire sectors of Ras Issa were scorched. Fuel tanks reduced to molten wrecks. Communications towers toppled at their base. Pickup trucks abandoned with doors hanging open. Engines still warm. The clearest indicator of defeat: no counterattack, no missile launches, no radar activity, no reaction. They were stunned, completely knocked offline. And this wasn't merely an airstrike. It was a multi-domain disruption, a coordinated offensive designed not just to destroy, but to disorient. This wasn't about holding territory, it was about seizing initiative. Control the pace and you control the conflict. With one rapid, precision operation, the U.S. flipped the script. The Houthis were no longer setting the rhythm. They were forced onto the back foot, not asking if another strike was coming, but how much more they stood to lose. To the Houthis, Ras Issa was supposed to be untouchable. Even during the height of the Saudi campaign, the oil terminal was spared, an unofficial red line. Why? Because it wasn't just about fuel, it symbolized status. Striking it meant crossing a threshold with geopolitical stakes, potential public outrage, and economic reverberations. But on April 17th, the U.S. crossed that line, without pause. That single act redrew the playbook. This wasn't merely a battlefield blow, it was a strategic realignment. For months, U.S. policy centered on deterrence. steering clear of escalation while preserving the flow of maritime trade. Navy destroyers escorted vessels. Carrier strike groups stood guard in quiet readiness, and every Houthi provocation, whether drone swarms, missile firings, or radar locks, was met with measured restraint. But Ras Issa changed the dynamic. It wasn't just a fuel station anymore. It had become a military hub, used to direct operations, move arms, and support hostile activity. From Washington's view, it ceased being a logistics point and became a strategic asset. The Houthis had grown accustomed to American caution. They believed the U.S. wouldn't initiate. That miscalculation came at a high cost, because you don't obliterate a fuel terminal unless you're sending a signal, and that message echoed far beyond Yemen. Tehran got the message, so did Damascus, and Moscow. This wasn't retaliation, it was preventive force. If you repurpose civilian infrastructure for combat, it becomes a valid target. If you conceal command units beneath oil reserves, those reserves lose their immunity. If your depot fuels drone attacks on global shipping lanes, that depot is no longer protected. The real shift wasn't in the number of bombs dropped. It was in the intent behind them. No public statements, no press briefings, just confirmed intel, ISR feeds, and a refined doctrine, allowing preemptive, pinpoint strikes with zero ambiguity. It was precise. It was calculated. And on the world stage, it was a shockwave. Within a day, oil markets trembled. Allied nations convened emergency briefings. Hotlines buzzed across Gulf capitals. The Ras Issa strike delivered a stark warning. If it powers your military apparatus, it's a target. That doctrine doesn't stop at the Houthis. It applies to any force, state or rogue, masking combat operations under civilian cover. There's no longer a blanket shield for critical infrastructure. Ras Issa proved the boundaries have shifted, and the repercussions are tangible. The flames burned for hours. Infrared satellite feeds showed lingering hotspots by sunrise. But by then, the U.S. was already repositioned. Jets were refueled. Phase 2 was underway. This wasn't a knee-jerk response. It was calculated warfare, driven by a strategy of disruption, precision, and psychological dominance. The Houthis didn't just lose a port, they lost momentum. They lost sanctuaries, and they lost the confidence that the U.S. would hold back. Now every action they take, every supply run, every radar ping, every midnight fuel convoy comes with a looming doubt. Is this the next strike zone? Because once infrastructure is turned into a weapon, it stops being shielded. Now here's a question for you. If you had the authority, would you have hit Ras Issa? Would you have targeted the fuel tanks, communication nodes, and relay stations? Or would you have chosen restraint, tried to prevent escalation? Think tactically. Be honest. Drop your perspective in the comments. We read them all. And if this breakdown gave you clarity, or maybe even chills, do us a solid. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Tap the notification bell so you never miss a deep dive. Want to take it further and support the mission? Click. Join on our channel page. You'll get loyalty badges, priority replies, and help us share more real naval operations with the world. Until next time, stay alert, stay secure, and remember, modern warfare isn't always fought in open combat. Sometimes it's hidden in plain sight. Thanks for watching.